You could buy every house on this street, the whole block, the empty lot at the end. You've done the math. You wouldn't feel it. So explain this. Explain why you've been parked outside a $600 a month apartment for 20 minutes, engine running, and you can't make yourself walk to the door. You reach for the handle, then you stop, hand on the door, and you don't move. You lived here once. The hallway light was burnt out then, and it's still burnt out now. Nobody ever fixed it, because nobody needed to. Rosa, at the end of the hall, left her door cracked open every night. The blue glow from her TV spilled into the dark, and before you even reached your own door, she'd call out, "That you?" She knew your footsteps. That was 20 years ago. You cut the engine, you open the door, put one foot on the pavement, and sit there half in, half out of a car worth more than this entire building, stuck on the one question you drove across the city to answer, and now can't. If you climb those stairs tonight, would she still know it was you? You pull your foot back in, you close the door. It started with a promise you made your wife, one you meant with everything you had. You were getting out, the wound. 9 years earlier, the fever comes at 2 in the morning. Your daughter is 4, and she's burning up, and the little bottle in the cabinet is empty. You shook it, you checked twice. Your wife's voice is climbing. The nearest open pharmacy is 15 minutes away, and your car is a maybe on cold nights. Then there's a knock. Soft. 3 taps. Rosa's in her robe, hair down, holding a bottle of children's medicine already half used because her grandkids come through. She heard the crying through the wall. The walls here are that thin, and she didn't call, she didn't text, she just came. She sits on the edge of the couch and shows your wife the dropper, how much, how often, and she stays until the fever breaks. This is the building. 3rd floor, no elevator, a radiator that knocks like someone's trying to get in. You know every family on the floor by sound. The couple upstairs who argue in Portuguese and make up loud, the old man who plays the same 3 records. Downstairs, there's a guy named Eddie who fixes cars in the lot, and one January morning when yours won't turn over, he's out there in the cold with jumper cables before you've even popped the hood, waving off the 20 you try to press on him. "Get your girl to school," he says. "Pay me never." You're known here, down to your footsteps. You just can't see it. What you see is the water stain spreading on the ceiling, the mattress on the floor, the math that never closes. So one night, standing at the window with your daughter asleep against your shoulder, you make your wife a promise. You're getting her out of here. A real house, a yard, a street where the ceiling doesn't leak and the car starts every time. She believes you believe you, and at that moment, leaving this place is the most loving thing you can imagine doing for the people you love. You start the 2nd job that week. The first shift. 3 years later, you carry a couch through a door that's yours. The house is small, and 20 minutes north, 1 bathroom, a patch of grass out front that's technically a yard. You did it. The keys are in your pocket, and they're yours. A man from next door wanders over while you're wrestling the couch off the truck. Big guy, friendly, grabs the other end without being asked, and helps you angle it through the door. You crack 2 beers on the empty living room floor and talk for an hour, kids, jobs, the neighborhood. It's easy. He leaves, and you realize you never got his last name. It didn't come up. You'll wave at each other for years, and it'll never come up. You don't notice that yet. What you notice is Rosa, who drove up that same afternoon to help. She's carrying boxes marked kitchen up your new walkway, and at the door she stops and looks around at the grass, the driveway, the space, and she smiles like it's hers too. "Look at this," she says. "Look at what you did." Before she leaves, she presses a foil container into your hands. She cooked. Of course she cooked. The thing she always made when it mattered. And on the porch she says, "Don't you become a stranger now. Come by Sunday, I'll make the good one. You promise you will." You both mean it completely. Then Sunday comes. You've been unpacking for 6 days and your back is gone and the drive is 40 minutes round trip. You'll go next week. You call to tell her. She picks up on the first ring, and you can hear it behind her before you say anything, the pot going, the lid, the radio she puts on when she cooks for people. "You're early," she says, happy. "I'm not even done yet. Anna's coming down too. She wants to see the baby. She invited her daughter. To see yours. She's been telling people you're coming." You say the words, "Not this week, we're buried up here and the radio's still going," and there's a silence where the pot used to be the only sound. Then she says it, warm, easy, letting you off the hook the way she lets everyone off every hook. "Okay, next Sunday." A little laugh. "Tell the baby Grandma Rosa's waiting on her." I'll keep it in the freezer. You hang up. The container she gave you the day you moved goes to the back of the new fridge, behind the milk. You mean to return it. Weeks later, you find it there, the food gone soft and gray, and you throw the whole thing out, plastic and all, because it's easier than washing it and driving it back. You still don't call about next Sunday. She doesn't either, she'd never push. Nobody did anything. There was no fight. So why does the new house, with its dry ceiling and its yard and its car that starts every time, already feel quieter than the leaking one ever did? The wave. 2 years on, you know your neighbor's hand better than his voice. His name is Dan, and he waves. Every morning, backing out of his driveway, coffee in the cup holder, a real wave, the whole arm. You wave back. In 2 years, that wave is the entire relationship. You've never been inside his house. He's never been inside yours. You tell yourself that's just how it is out here. People are private. It's fine. Then comes the morning your car won't start. It's a school morning. Your daughter's in the passenger seat with her backpack on, and the engine turns over and dies. Turns over and dies. She's watching the clock on the dash. You pop the hood like you know what you're looking at. Dan's in his driveway, 20 feet away, washing his car. Hose running, sponge in hand, suds sliding down the paint. He sees you. He lifts his free hand the same friendly morning wave and calls across the 2 driveways, cheerful. Mondays, right? Then he goes back to his wheels. You get her to school eventually. A neighbor 2 streets over, a jump from a stranger, 20 late minutes. She doesn't say anything the whole way. She's 9, and she's quiet in the way 9-year-olds get when they're working something out. That night you're turning off her lamp and she says it into the dark, not really asking, just trying to understand how the world is arranged. Dad, why didn't the man help us? He was busy, baby. He was washing his car. You turn off the lamp, the bigger price. The next house has a fence, and you're standing on the good side of it the day you overhear what you're worth. Things moved fast. The business turned, the money came, and the new place is the kind with a 6-foot cedar fence between the yard's privacy, the realtor called it. You're back there one evening, rolling up the hose when you hear your neighbor's voice on the other side, low. They redid the whole kitchen. What's that, 60, 70 grand? 2 cars in the driveway now. A pause. Guy's doing better than he lets on. You stand very still with the hose in your hands. There's a version of you living over here you never introduced anybody to a number with a kitchen and 2 cars, being kept, being tallied, by people who smile at you at the mailbox. You go inside. You don't mention it to your wife. A few years later, your daughter comes home, lit up. There's a girl from the big houses at the top of the hill who's asked her to a birthday party, the first invitation from up there, ever. She's 12 now, and she's already deciding what to wear. Then she stops in the kitchen doorway, holding the little envelope, and asks you something she means as good news. Is it because we're rich now? She's smiling when she says it. She doesn't know it's a question that has a floor under it, and then another floor under that. Why would you say that? Katie said her mom said we're doing really well now. She shrugs, happy. So it worked, right? Us moving here. It worked. You tell her, yeah. You tell her to go pick out something nice. She runs upstairs. You stay in the kitchen with the invitation in your hand. The test. By the time you're worth a few million, you've stopped waiting for the street to open its doors, so you decide to open yours. You throw a party. Caterers, a bar by the pool, string lights across the whole backyard, every house on the cul-de-sac invited. You tell yourself it's just a party. It isn't. You want to be the one who opens the door first, on a street where no door has ever opened for you. They come, all of them, standing around your pool with your wine, complimenting the kitchen they already priced. But there's one you're actually glad to see, Mark. He moved in a year ago, and he's the only one who ever came by for no reason, beers on the porch, no agenda. When your daughter left for college in the fall and the house went quiet and strange, Mark's the one who noticed, who showed up with a 6-pack and sat with you on the steps until it didn't feel so much like something had ended. He knows which beer you drink. He never once asked what you do. He finds you by the bar around the time the party's good and loud, puts a hand on your shoulder, tells you the place looks incredible, that the whole street came out for you. Then he lowers his voice, friendly, leaning in like it's just the 2 of you. Hey, while I've got you, I've been wanting to run something past you. This deal I'm putting together, you're exactly the guy I need on the ground floor. He's still smiling, his hand still on your shoulder. You say, sure, send it over. He claps you on the back, says he knew you'd get it, and drifts back toward the pool. His hand leaves your shoulder. You stay at the bar. The caterers leave at 11. The lights stay on over an empty yard. You walk at once, picking up a few cups nobody bothered to carry inside. Later, you're on the couch and your phone is in your hand, and Rosa's name is right there, and your thumb sits on it. She'd pick up on the first ring, no matter the hour. She'd say that you? Like no time had passed. You lock the phone and set it face down on the cushion. You wouldn't know how to start. The return. The gated street doesn't ignore you. That's the strange part. It comes at you in a receiving line. You moved again the top, or close to it. Private drive, a gate with a code, houses set so far back, you never see a neighbor, unless they mean to be seen. And they mean to be seen. The first week they arrive, one after another, with a reason attached. A board seat, a fund, a gala, a table, a name to drop. Every handshake is a small transaction wearing a welcome's clothes. One night at a dinner you didn't want to attend, a man you've just met is 3 sentences in before he mentions the opportunity he'd like to bring you into, and you realize you cannot remember the last time a person walked up to you wanting nothing. So the next morning you get in the car and drive across the city, back the way you came, 20 years back, to a brick building with a hallway light that's still burnt out. You climb the stairs, 3rd floor, end of the hall, her door. You knock, there's a shuffle inside, a slow one, and her voice complaining at the stairs and her knees before the lock even turns. The door opens and it's Rosa, older, smaller, gray now, a dish towel over her shoulder. She looks at you for 1 second. Then her whole face opens. There he is, she says, like you've been expected. Like you were coming Sunday and Sunday finally came. She pulls you in by the arm, the same pull, and the apartment smells the way it always smelled, and there's a game show on too loud. And she's already moving toward the stove, because of course she is. She asks about your wife by name. She asks about your daughter, she must be grown now, in college. And she remembers the fever, remembers being on that couch, laughs about how tiny she was, how hot her little forehead got. She still calls her Ladybug, the name she gave her before the kid could walk. She doesn't ask what you do. She doesn't ask about the house, or the gate, or the number. It doesn't occur to her. She sets a cup of coffee in front of you that you didn't ask for too strong, the way it always was, the way she never once got right, and sits down across the small table and looks at you with the plainest happiness you've seen on a face in years. I always knew you'd be somebody, she says. She pats your hand once, the way you pat something you're proud of. You look down at the coffee. It's the same kind of cup she used 20 years ago, thick, white diner china, a little chip on the rim. You don't trust your face yet. Peace. You stay longer than you meant to. She tells you about the building who's still here, who passed, the leak on 2 they still haven't fixed. She refills the coffee you didn't finish. When you finally stand to go, she walks you to the door on her slow knees, and she reaches up and holds your face in both hands for a second, the way she used to when you were younger and tired, and she says, "Don't be a stranger, you hear me," and she means it exactly as much as she meant it 20 years ago. You say you won't. You go down the stairs. She stays in the doorway. You can feel it, the light from her television spilling into the dark hall behind you the whole way down, the way it did 10,000 nights. She doesn't close the door until she hears your feet reach the bottom. You drive home across the city, back to the gate and the code and the private drive. It's dark by the time you pull in. Your porch light is already on. It came on by itself, on a timer. At dusk it was on before you got here, and it will shut itself off at midnight whether you're home or not. You sit in the car in your own driveway. Across the street, a garage door rolls down. A neighbor pulls in 2 houses over, headlights sweeping past you, and walks inside without looking over. A curtain settles, then nothing. You cut the engine. You walk up to your own door, and your foot hits the step, and there's no voice. You go inside. Behind you, the porch light stays on, bright and automatic, waiting for no one. At midnight, it turns itself off, and in the quiet, you finally understand what it cost you.